Do you like scary movies? This chilling line from the legendary horror film Scream sets the tone for our journey today. We're embarking on a thrilling ride through the history of horror movies, a genre that has, for decades, captivated and petrified audiences around the globe. The universal appeal of these films lies in their ability to stir our deepest fears, yet leave us craving for more. So, brace yourselves as we delve into the spine-chilling world of horror cinema. The horror genre has its roots in the silent film era, where the scares were conveyed through eerie visuals and chilling performances. It was a time when the world of cinema was just beginning to take shape, and filmmakers were exploring the boundaries of their craft. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the birth of horror movies, during an era when dialogue was non-existent and the story was told through stark visuals and exaggerated performances. One of the earliest and most influential horror films of this period was none other than The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Released in 1920, this German expressionist film told a surreal and disturbing tale of a hypnotist who uses a somnambulist to commit murders. The film's twisted visuals and stark black and white imagery created an atmosphere of dread and uncertainty, setting a high benchmark for the horror genre. Another cornerstone of silent horror cinema is the classic vampire tale Nosferatu. Released in 1922, this film was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Despite its rocky legal history, Nosferatu is a masterpiece of horror cinema. Its depiction of Count Orlok as a monstrous rat-like creature was a far cry from the suave and charming vampires of later years. The film's use of shadows and haunting imagery has left a lasting impression on the genre. These films and others from the silent era demonstrated that horror could be effectively conveyed without a single spoken word. They relied heavily on the power of visuals, atmospheric music, and the raw talent of their performers. The innovative storytelling techniques used in these films set the stage for the evolution of the horror genre. They showed audiences that cinema could be used to explore the darker corners of the human psyche, and they paved the way for the chilling tales of terror that would follow in the decades to come. As the silent era ended, horror was about to take a terrifying turn. With the advent of talkies, horror films found a new voice, quite literally. This revolutionary technology transformed the silent, monochrome world of horror into a realm of chilling sounds and eerie dialogues. It was during the 30s and 40s that horror truly started to talk, and oh, how terrifyingly it spoke. The introduction of sound in horror films allowed filmmakers to tap into a whole new dimension of fear. The creaking of a door, the howling of the wind, or the ominous whispering of an unseen entity became tools to heighten suspense and terror. It's one thing to see a haunted house, but quite another to hear its ghostly whispers. Sound made the unseen seen, and the unimaginable imaginable. This era also witnessed the rise of some of the most iconic movie monsters, characters that would go on to become cultural icons. Dracula, the suave yet sinister vampire, emerged from the shadows, his chilling voice echoing in the dark. Frankenstein's monster, a tragic figure brought to life with a thunderous crash, sent shivers down our spines. And who could forget the Wolfman, his guttural growls and the haunting sounds of his transformation forever etched in our collective memory. These characters were not just monsters, but complex beings with their own stories, their own tragedies. In giving them a voice, filmmakers made them real, made them relatable, and in doing so made them all the more terrifying. They weren't just creatures lurking in the dark, they were reflections of our own fears and anxieties, amplified through the power of sound. These films and their characters have not just endured, but thrived, influencing generations of horror films and filmmakers. Their legacy can be seen and heard in every creaking door, every ominous whisper, and every monstrous growl in modern horror cinema. The golden age of horror had set the stage for what was to come. It gave horror a voice, and in doing so transformed the genre forever. From the chilling whispers of Dracula to the thunderous crash of Frankenstein, the talkies era was truly a time of terror. In the atomic age, horror films reflected societal fears, resulting in a new breed of monsters. This era, spanning the 50s and 60s, was a time of profound change and uncertainty. The dawn of the nuclear age brought with it an underlying dread of atomic warfare and the unknown consequences of rapid technological advancement. And horror cinema, as it often does, mirrored these anxieties in its narratives. A prime example of this is one of the most iconic films of the era, Godzilla. Emerging from the sea, this colossal, fire-breathing beast, a creation of nuclear radiation, served as a chilling metaphor for the horrors of the atomic bomb. The film resonated deeply with audiences, not just in its home country of Japan, where the memories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still fresh, but across the globe, reflecting the universal fear of nuclear catastrophe. But it wasn't only gigantic monsters that kept audiences on the edge of their seats. The era also saw the rise of psychological horror, with films like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Here, the monsters were not radioactive beasts, but seemingly ordinary humans bringing a new kind of terror to the screen. Psycho, with its infamous shower scene and chilling portrayal of mental instability, shocked audiences and forever changed the landscape of horror cinema. These films, and others like them, tapped into the era's collective fears, using them to craft stories that thrilled, chilled, and most importantly, reflected the times. They set the stage for the horror genre's evolution, influencing countless filmmakers and shaping the way we experience fear on screen. As we moved into the 70s and 80s, horror was about to get a lot more personal. The monsters weren't just on the screen anymore, they were in our homes, in our dreams, even in our own minds. But that's a tale for another time. For now, let's appreciate the atomic age of horror, a time when our fears were given form and the cinema became a mirror to our darkest anxieties. The 70s and 80s saw the rise of slashers and survival horror, bringing the terror closer to home. This era was a turning point in the history of horror movies. It was a time when filmmakers began to explore the darkness lurking in the everyday, where the monsters weren't supernatural beings from far-off lands, but often just the guy next door. Take, for instance, Halloween. Released in 1978, this John Carpenter classic introduced us to Michael Myers, an unstoppable force of evil in a white mask, stalking the suburban streets of Haddonfield. The film's success not only spawned a franchise that's still going strong today, but it also set the blueprint for many slasher films to follow. Then there's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Its gritty documentary-style realism and shocking violence was unlike anything audiences had seen before. The film was so controversial upon its release in 1974, it was banned in several countries. But that didn't stop it from becoming one of the most influential horror films of all time. And who could forget The Shining? Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Stephen King's novel was a masterclass in psychological horror. It showed us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are those that lurk within our own minds. These films were not just about the scares, they were a reflection of the anxieties and fears of the time. They made us question our safety, our sanity, and even our own neighbors. But beyond their capacity to frighten, these films also had a significant impact on popular culture. They introduced iconic villains, memorable quotes, and scenes that have been etched into the collective consciousness. They pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on screen, and in doing so, changed the face of horror. These films have left a lasting legacy on the genre, influencing countless films to come. They showed us that horror could be found in the most ordinary places, and that sometimes the real monsters are closer than we think. In the modern era, horror films have continued to evolve, tackling diverse subjects and pushing boundaries. The 1990s saw the rise of a new subgenre, the found footage film, with The Blair Witch Project leading the charge. This film, shot in a documentary style, used its low-budget aesthetic to its advantage, creating a sense of reality and immediacy that had audiences questioning what was real and what was fiction. As we moved into the new millennium, horror didn't just stick to ghouls, ghosts, and monsters. It started delving deep into the human psyche, exploring the horrors within. A prime example of this trend is Get Out, a film that uses the genre to comment on issues of race and identity in contemporary society. It's not just a horror film, it's a social critique wrapped in a chilling narrative. The supernatural, a staple of horror, also saw a resurgence with films like The Conjuring. These films brought back the classic haunted house trope, but with a modern twist, using atmosphere and suspense over gore and shock value to create fear. And let's not forget the rise of horror television series like The Walking Dead and Stranger Things, which have brought the genre to the small screen with big impact. Horror continues to reinvent itself, ensuring that audiences will always have something to fear. From silent scares to modern terrors, horror films have come a long way. From the spine-chilling silence of the late 19th century to the heart-stopping horrors of today, these films have continuously evolved, reflecting society's deepest fears and anxieties. They have not only entertained us but also influenced popular culture, shaping our collective nightmares. The enduring appeal of horror movies lies in their ability to thrill and terrify while offering a safe space to explore our fears. The journey of horror cinema continues as filmmakers find new ways to scare us, but remember, it's only a movie. Or is it?